Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this comforting expectation of total precision.
Oh, absolutely. It operates almost like engineering in a way.
Right. Like if you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital and they take an x-ray and it shows that unmistakable, jagged white line.
Yeah, the doctor just points at the illuminated screen and says, well, there it is. That is the problem.
Exactly. It's clean. It's entirely definitive. You're looking at empirical evidence of a physical fracture.
And because it's visible, the treatment path is immediately obvious to everyone involved, right?
Yeah, it's broken or it's not broken. But then you step into the world of our internal lives.
Which is infinitely messier.
Exactly. You step into our psychology, our deep-seated spiritual conditioning, our sense of self, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Yeah, because we just can't see the fractures in our own minds.
We can't. But what if you were handed a diagnosis about your very nature the moment you were born?
Wow. Okay, yeah.
A diagnosis that precedes anything you have ever actually done. Like a diagnosis that basically says you are fundamentally, invisibly, and permanently broken.
I mean, carrying a diagnosis like that, the belief that your essential nature is flawed before you even have the cognitive ability to form a sentence, that is heavy.
It's a massive weight.
It's arguably one of the heaviest psychological burdens a human being can endure.
Yeah.
I mean, it colors every interaction, every aspiration, and every single failure.
It really is an immense weight. And that is exactly the profound, highly sensitive, and quite frankly, revolutionary terrain we're walking into today.
It's a big one.
It is. So for you listening right now, wherever you are, whatever background you come from, we are unpacking an incredibly potent excerpt from a book called The Nature of Reality by Joe Bandra.
Such a fascinating text.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is incredibly specific, but it applies to almost everyone. We're examining the invisible psychological burdens we carry. We are going to focus the entirety of this conversation on a single question that challenges some of the deepest, most foundational assumptions that you and practically everyone else functioning in modern society have held since childhood.
It is a profound mission, honestly. And because of the nature of Bandra's work, we are inherently touching on the concept of religion and inherited dogma here.
Which is tricky territory.
Very tricky. So we have to acknowledge right out of the gate that religion is deeply, deeply personal. It's not merely a set of intellectual propositions that people debate in a classroom,
Right. For a lot of people, it's their entire world. I mean, it's the framework for their family structure.
Precisely. The text we're looking at today, recognizes this explicitly.
Yeah.
It notes that for billions of people, religion is memory. It's community.
It's the source of ultimate hope for so many.
Yeah, it's the very language they were given to make sense of life, to make sense of death, and to navigate the agonizing realities of human suffering.
So to simply write that off would be intellectually dishonest.
Right.
And entirely lacking in compassion.
Exactly. Which means we need a very quick, very clear rule of engagement here before we dive in.
Let's lay it out.
The author makes it unequivocally clear that this text is not an attack on religion.
Right.
We are not here to mock anyone's faith, we aren't insulting any tradition, and we absolutely aren't trying to declare that one specific group has the ultimate truth. That's just not the game we are playing today.
No, in fact, there is a crucial line in Bandra's text that sets the tone for this entire inquiry. He states that the purpose of this exploration is not to violently tear down your old set of beliefs, only to hand you a shiny new set of beliefs for you to blindly swallow.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Bandra writes that doing so would just be, and I love this quote, changing the wallpaper inside the same psychological prison.
Changing the wallpaper inside the same psychological prison. I mean, I love that imagery.
It's so visceral.
Because if I am sitting in a locked cell, it fundamentally does not matter if the walls are painted a drab gray or if someone comes in and puts up a lovely, cheerful floral pattern.
Right, the aesthetic has improved, sure, but you're still locked in.
Exactly. The parameters of my freedom haven't changed an inch. But I do have to ask the obvious question here, just to play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
If the goal of this deep dive in this text isn't to give the listener a new, better, more modern belief system to hold on to, then what exactly are we trying to accomplish?
That's a fair question.
Like, if we aren't replacing the operating system, why are we even opening up the computer?
Well, the goal, according to the text, is pure, unadulterated inquiry. It is not about telling you what to believe at the end of this conversation.
Okay.
It's about asking you to ruthlessly examine why you believe what you believe right now.
To look under the hood.
Exactly. The text poses a deeply confronting question to the reader, which is, have you ever been told the truth about reality? Or have you simply inherited a story about reality?
Inheriting a story versus discovering the truth. I mean, that is a massive distinction.
It's the difference between living firsthand and living secondhand, honestly.
Wow, yeah.
The text invites us to move away from seeking a new authority figure, like a new guru, a new philosopher, or even a new podcast, to tell us what to think. Instead, it demands that we begin investigating the mechanics of our own minds.
Which brings us right to the geography of our inherited beliefs. And the text poses a thought experiment here that is brilliant in its simplicity.
It really is.
But it really pulls the rug out from under you if you sit with it. So I want you, the listener, to really imagine this.
Take a second to actually picture it.
Yeah. Think about your deepest, most tightly held convictions. The things you absolutely know to be true about right and wrong, about the nature of the universe, about human morality.
The foundational stuff.
Right. Now imagine if you had been born in an entirely different country. Imagine being born to another family totally immersed in a completely different religious or cultural tradition.
Say halfway across the globe.
Exactly. If the accident of your birth had simply dropped you on a different longitude and latitude, wouldn't you be defending an entirely different version of truth with the exact same level of fiery certainty that you feel right now?
I mean, it is the ultimate accident of birth scenario, and it is a deeply humbling exercise.
It really makes you pause.
Yeah. The text uses this thought experiment to point out the vast, invisible array of what we might call belief donors.
Belief donors, I like that phrase, meaning like the people and institutions who donated their worldview to us before we could consent to it?
Exactly. When you look closely at your own mind, the text asks a penetrating question. Were your deepest beliefs actually discovered by you through rigorous personal investigation?
Or were they just handed down?
Right, or were they simply handed down to you?
Yeah.
We inherit our beliefs from a long line of donors, our parents, our immediate culture, our local religious institutions, our early school teachers.
Even the broader society we just happen to be born into.
Yep, all of it.
It reminds me of inheriting a native language. You know, you didn't invent the language you speak.
Not at all.
You didn't sit down as a 6-month-old infant, stroke your chin, and decide, I think I will use the English language to construct my internal monologue.
Right, you didn't have a linguistic menu to choose from.
Exactly. The vocabulary, the grammar, the syntax, the idioms, it was all entirely given to you by your environment.
And yet, that inherited language dictates exactly how you are able to express your deepest most intimate feelings.
It literally shapes the boundaries of your thinking. If you don't have a word for a concept, it's incredibly difficult to even conceptualize it.
It's so true.
So, if our language is entirely inherited by the random accident of geography, are our moral and spiritual identities formed in the exact same way?
Well, the text strongly suggests that they are. We inherit these moral and spiritual frameworks just like we inherit language.
That's wild to think about.
It is. And just as we rarely pause to question the grammatical structure of our native tongue, we just use it because it's all we know. We rarely question the foundational assumptions of our inherited worldview.
We just assume our worldview is reality.
Exactly. Rather than a lens through which we are viewing reality. But the author emphasizes that recognizing this conditioning isn't an act of rebellion.
Right. It's not about being an edgy teenager.
No, it's not about being angry at your parents or your culture. It is simply the necessary first step toward actual freedom.
Because you can't be free from something if you are completely oblivious to the fact that it is controlling you. I mean, you're just a puppet who loves his strings at that point.
Precisely. And this is where the text defines what awakening actually means in this specific philosophical context.
Which is an important definition to nail down.
Yes. It explicitly states that awakening does not begin when someone hands you the final ultimate answer to all of life's mysteries. Awakening begins when you finally cultivate the courage to question the answers you were given.
The courage to question. I love that. So let's make a pact with you, the listener, right now.
Little agreement for this episode.
Yeah. For the duration of this deep dive, treat this space like a laboratory. Think of it as a sterile, safe environment where we are just putting ideas on a slide and sliding them under a microscope.
It's observing. No pressure.
Exactly. Don't just blindly believe what we are analyzing from this text. Examine it. Challenge it in your own mind.
Look at your own life for the evidence.
Right. Keep whatever survives your own internal, rigorous inquiry, and happily, easily let go of whatever doesn't.
That is the exact spirit of empirical inquiry the text demands from the reader.
So, with the rules of the laboratory set, what is the core burden we are putting under the microscope today? Like, what is this sweeping diagnosis that we've all been unconsciously carrying around?
The text lays it out very clearly. The central belief that Bandra seeks to deconstruct is the idea, the deeply ingrained assumption that I am a sinner.
Wow, just those 4 words.
Yes. And it is vital that we do not underestimate the historical, cultural, and psychological weight of those 4 words. I am a sinner.
It's heavy.
The text argues that this single, solitary belief has shaped the trajectory of entire civilizations. It has influenced human behavior, law, art, and commerce on a massive global scale.
And on a personal level, too.
Absolutely. On an individual level, it has been the root cause of unimaginable chronic guilt, pervasive fear, and a quiet, simmering self-hatred for thousands of years.
It is basically the ultimate pre-existing condition. You arrive on the planet, and almost immediately, before you can even articulate a thought, you are handed this label by the culture.
You're given a diagnosis before you show symptoms.
Exactly. You are told you're fundamentally flawed. You're born with a stain. You are intrinsically wrong.
And to dismantle this, or at least to examine it properly to see if it holds up to scrutiny, the text provides a multifaceted framework.
Right. It looks at this from a few different angles.
It invites us to look at human existence through several different perspectives, from the most grounded biological realities to the most abstract philosophical concepts.
Just to see if this label of sinner actually exists anywhere in reality.
Exactly.
So let's start with the most grounded, undeniable reality we have. Let's step away from philosophy and theology entirely for a moment and look purely at biology.
Physical world.
Yes, let's look at the physical world. Let's set the scene based on the text. Imagine a newborn child in a hospital maternity ward right this very second.
Okay, picturing it.
According to the text, from the strict perspective of biology, that infant arrives entirely, 100% blank of any moral labels.
Just a clean slate physically.
Right. That baby does not belong to a political party.
Mm-hmm.
It does not possess a religious affiliation. It has absolutely zero concept of morality, ethics, or sin.
From a purely physical, scientific standpoint, what is actually happening in that bassinet? The text strips it down to its most basic, observable elements.
What's the biology doing?
Well, the infant breathes oxygen. Its tiny heart pumps blood. Its cells are rapidly dividing according to its DNA. Its nervous system is firing, developing, and mapping the new environment.
So it's just a living machine at that point.
It is, unequivocally, a biological organism functioning exactly as nature intended.
Right. If you take a blood sample from that newborn, you can find out its blood type. You can look at its genetics and see if it has a predisposition for blue eyes or brown hair.
Sure, all the physical markers.
But there is absolutely no biological marker for sinner. You can't put the blood under a microscope and find the corrupted sin cells.
No, you definitely cannot.
The physical reality of the human being is entirely devoid of the concept.
And the text expands on this biological baseline by emphasizing the absolute, unflinching neutrality of nature itself. This is a crucial point in the argument.
The neutrality of nature.
Yes. Nature, the physical universe, makes absolutely no distinction between someone that human society labels a saint and someone society labels a sinner.
Oh, that makes sense. Like the sun shines on everyone equally. It doesn't withhold its warmth from the criminal and shine brighter on the philanthropist.
Exactly. Gravity pulls on everyone with the exact same force, regardless of their moral standing.
Right.
If a perfectly virtuous person and a deeply cruel person both trip over a rock, they both hit the ground.
Nature doesn't care.
Nature doesn't care at all. The body follows biological laws, genetic instructions, and environmental adaptations. It responds to pathogens, it requires nutrition, and it seeks homeostasis.
It's just trying to survive.
Exactly. It does not follow, nor does it comprehend religious or moral identities.
So if we are just looking through the lens of biology, you are simply an evolving organism trying to survive in your environment. You are a biological event occurring in space and time.
A biological event. That's a good way to put it.
You are not a sinner. Biology has no use for the word. But I have to push back here because this is where the biological argument feels incomplete to me.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we are just neutral, innocent biological organisms, why do we mess up so incredibly badly?
Right. Where does the bad behavior come from?
Exactly. Why do we lie? Why do we manipulate? Why do people commit horrific acts of violence against one another? If it's not in our blood, where is it coming from?
That is the necessary transition point in the text. Biology alone cannot explain the complexity of human harm, which leads us directly into the psychological reality of human existence.
Moving from the body to the mind.
Right. The text asks exactly what you just asked. If we are not born inherently evil, why do human beings make such devastating mistakes? And the answer the text provides is fundamentally rooted in the mechanics of psychological conditioning.
Conditioning. So it's the software that gets installed on the biological hardware.
Precisely. The text explains that the human mind does not exist in a vacuum. Every single thought you have, every irrational fear that spikes your heart rate, every deeply held belief, every subconscious habit.
All the unprocessed trauma too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Every unprocessed trauma and every memory influences your behavior in the present moment. We are, psychologically speaking, the sum total of our conditioning.
The really terrifying part is that the vast majority of that conditioning is installed when we are entirely, utterly defenseless.
That is the crux of the psychological argument. Children absorb prejudices, rigid doctrines, and heavy familial expectations long before their prefrontal cortex is fully developed.
And that's the part of the brain responsible for critical thinking and rational filtering, right?
Exactly. It's not online yet.
The text points out that this is basically a generational relay race. Families unknowingly pass the baton of their unresolved fears to their children.
Cultures pass on their historical prejudices.
Religions pass on their rigid doctrines. Societies pass on their crushing expectations of what success and worthiness actually look like.
And neuroplasticity explains the how of this process perfectly, which aligns with the text's assertion.
The brain physically rewiring itself.
Yes. When a child is constantly exposed to a certain worldview or constantly subjected to a certain type of treatment, their brain literally wires itself to adapt to that specific environment. It builds neural pathways.
To survive that specific environment.
Right. If a child grows up in an environment of constant threat or criticism, their amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, becomes hyperreactive.
It's always looking for the next attack.
Exactly. Because of this accumulated physical programming in the brain, the text argues that most adults are not actually choosing their actions consciously in the present moment.
They're basically on autopilot.
They're simply reacting. They're playing out defensive scripts that were written for them decades ago by their environment.
I have to pause here because this represents a massive tectonic paradigm shift in how we view human behavior.
It really is a complete flip.
When someone does something harmful, when someone makes a terrible mistake or acts out in cruelty, the old framework, the sinner framework, looks at that person and asks a very specific question. It asks, what is wrong with this person?
Yes. It assumes a fundamental innate flaw. It assumes the essence of the person is corrupted.
But the psychological perspective changes the question entirely. It demands that we stop asking what is wrong with them and instead ask what happened to this person.
What happened to this person? That shift is revolutionary.
It's huge.
It moves the focus away from an internal, inescapable spiritual corruption and places it squarely onto an external, observable, causal chain of events. It looks at the environment, the trauma, the conditioning.
And honestly, looking at human behavior this way feels like a massive relief.
How so?
Well, it shifts the burden from this permanent, inescapable moral stain, like the terrifying idea that my soul is just dirty and I can never truly clean it, to a solvable puzzle of cause and effect.
It makes it actionable.
Exactly. Like, if I act out of sudden anger toward my partner, it's not because I'm possessed by a demon or because I am a fundamentally evil person. It's because an untended psychological wound from my past was triggered by my current environment and my brain reacted defensively.
Right. That doesn't excuse the anger, but it explains it.
Yes. Mistakes become opportunities for understanding the mechanism of the mind, rather than hard evidence that the machine is permanently cursed.
It is a profoundly more compassionate way to view human failure, both in others and in ourselves. But the text acknowledges that this raises a massive historical contradiction.
Oh, right, because someone had to start this.
Exactly. If biology shows us as neutral organisms and psychology shows us as conditioned beings driven by observable cause and effect, how on earth did the concept of the fundamentally flawed sinner become one of the most dominant, powerful, and enduring ideas in the history of human civilization?
Right. If it's not written in our DNA and it's not our psychological baseline at birth, someone had to invent it, and they had to have a reason. Like, why construct this elaborate architecture of guilt?
Understand that. The text asks us to zoom all the way out and look at the dawn of organized human civilization.
Going back a few thousand years.
Yeah, we have to look at the historical and institutional machinery that necessitated these concepts. Imagine humanity transitioning from small, nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes into larger agrarian societies and eventually into massive early cities.
Before you had modern governments, right, before there were police forces patrolling every corner, before written constitutions, complex legal systems, or penal codes.
Exactly. These early societies faced a monumental existential challenge. How do you keep thousands of strangers living in close proximity from tearing each other apart?
Especially when resources are scarce.
Exactly. They desperately needed a framework for order. They needed to encourage cooperation, discourage violence, manage scarce resources, and maintain some semblance of societal cohesion.
And the text explains that early religion, historically speaking, served as this primary foundational moral framework. It was the glue that held early civilizations together.
Yes, it was essentially the very first form of civic government. It provided the rules of the game.
And specifically, as societies evolved, particularly within the Abrahamic traditions, the concept of sin gradually evolved alongside them.
Right. It adapted to the needs of the time.
It began as a way to explain humanity's terrifying vulnerability to nature, like famine, disease, natural disasters were often interpreted as divine punishment for human failure.
Because they didn't have science to explain a drought yet.
Exactly. But over time, it became the central mechanism for explaining humanity's relationship with the divine, and more practically, it became the ultimate tool for enforcing moral conduct.
The ultimate deterrent.
Yeah. If the fear of a local magistrate wasn't enough to stop you from stealing, the fear of an all-seeing eternal judge certainly would.
But there is a darker, much more controlling side to this history that the text absolutely does not shy away from. It wasn't just about keeping the peace so people could farm in harmony. It quickly became about power.
The intertwining of religious narrative and political power is an undeniable historical reality.
It really is. The text details how this dynamic functioned and solidified over centuries. You had kings and emperors who claimed to rule, quote, by the grace of God.
Their political authority was entirely derived from religious endorsement.
You had priesthoods and clerics who positioned themselves as the sole interpreters of divine law. These religious institutions didn't just stay in the temples and concern themselves with the afterlife.
No, they got very involved in the day-to-day.
They became the dominant force in public life. They influenced education, they dictated the terms of marriage, they controlled the justice system, and they managed the wealth of entire nations.
And the psychological mechanism of control they utilized is fascinating. if a bit horrifying.
It's very effective.
The text points out a very clear correlation. The more deeply the general population believed they were spiritually flawed, the more they internalized the idea that they were born sick, broken, and offensive to the Creator, the more they absolutely depended on these external institutions and authorities.
They needed them for salvation, for forgiveness, and for guidance in every aspect of life.
It creates a perfect self-sustaining loop of dependency. I was actually thinking about this. And it is exactly like a subscription service for the soul.
A subscription service? I like that. Tell me more.
Well, think about how software works today. If a tech company can convince you that the brand new computer you just bought is actually incredibly vulnerable, that it is basically infected with a dormant virus the moment it comes off the assembly line.
Okay. Yeah.
And that they are the only company on Earth that sells the specific antivirus software required to keep it from crashing, you are going to pay them every single month forever. You will never cancel the subscription out of fear.
Because you think your machine is fundamentally compromised.
Exactly. Historically, if a powerful institution can convince you that you are fundamentally broken by default, you will endlessly pay the toll. You'll pay it through absolute obedience, you'll pay it through the psychological weight of guilt, and you'll pay it through literal tithes and taxes.
All given to the very institutions that are generously offering the cure for the disease they diagnosed you with in the first place. That is a very modern, but highly accurate and effective analogy for the historical dynamic the text is describing. The institutionalization of guilt is a powerful mechanism for social control.
It's brilliant from a control standpoint.
It is. However, as an expert analyzing this text, I must impartially note that Bandra provides necessary historical balance here. The text does not lazily argue that this was purely a malicious, mustache-twirling conspiracy cooked up by evil men in dark rooms.
It wasn't just a comic book villain plot.
Exactly. It acknowledges the complexity of human history. It notes that the language of sin and the fear of divine judgment did inspire incredible acts of compassion.
It did. It inspired genuine repentance, rigorous ethical living, and massive charitable movements.
The belief systems built around these concepts constructed the first hospitals, funded orphanages, and provided safety nets for the poorest members of society when governments did not care at all.
Right. It wasn't all bad actors. Many people within these systems genuinely believed they were saving souls and building a better world.
Precisely. But the text argues the dual nature of this framework meant it was equally, if not more often, weaponized.
Because it's such a potent tool.
Across almost every major human civilization, these powerful ideas were used by the elite to cultivate fear, enforce strict obedience, suppress dissent, and maintain the political and economic status quo. The concept of the fundamental sinner was, simply put, an incredibly effective, highly scalable tool for managing large populations.
So we have this sweeping historical context. We have the macro-level machinery spanning centuries, kings, priests, empires, massive societal structures, all operating on this concept of inherent human flaw.
The big picture.
Yes, the big picture. But where this text gets truly devastating is when we zoom all the way back in from the historical macro to the psychological micro.
Back to the individual.
Right, because all of that sweeping history, all of those institutional mechanisms, eventually filter down and land squarely on the shoulders of a vulnerable 3-year-old child.
Yes. The text transitions from the historical machinery of civilization to the intimate fabrication of personal identity. It explores how the sweeping ideas of empires actually take root and blossom inside a single developing human mind.
And this is where I want to explicitly mention Joe Bandra, because Bandra delivers what I think is the most devastating, profound psychological insight in the entire excerpt.
The insight regarding the mechanics of early childhood programming.
Exactly. Bandra points out what actually happens neurologically and psychologically when you take a 3 or 4-year-old child and repeatedly tell them they are born sinful.
When you tell them they are inherently unworthy.
When you tell them they deserve punishment unless they behave perfectly according to an invisible standard.
And we have to remember, as we touched on during the psychological discussion, what a child's brain is doing at that specific age.
It's just a sponge.
It is an absolute sponge. Children naturally, biologically trust their parents and caretakers. It is not a choice. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism.
They have to trust them to survive.
The child must believe what their caretakers tell them about the world in order to survive it. If a parent says a fire is hot, the child believes it. If a parent says the child is fundamentally bad, The child believes it with the exact same level of survival-based certainty.
They trust their teachers, they trust religious leaders.
Exactly. They have no cognitive firewall to reject these concepts.
So the developing brain just absorbs this terrifying concept of fundamental unworthiness without any ability to question it, analyze it, or reject it.
And Bandra outlines this tragic, invisible pipeline perfectly. This is the core mechanism of how identity is fabricated.
How does he phrase it?
The text states what begins as a sentence eventually becomes a belief. The belief becomes an emotion. The emotion becomes an identity.
Wow. Let's slow down and really look at the mechanics of that pipeline because it is terrifyingly mundane.
It happens every day.
It does. A parent, perhaps acting out of their own unexamined conditioning, says a sentence to a toddler, "You are a bad boy."
The child hears that sentence repeated enough times, and the brain, which loves to build patterns to save energy, solidifies it.
It becomes a belief. I guess I am bad.
That cognitive belief then generates a constant physiological response. It generates an emotion, chronic shame, underlying fear, a low-grade anxiety that never really goes away.
And over years, over decades of that emotion running in the background of the nervous system, it hardens into an identity. It ceases to be something they feel and becomes who they think they are.
And that leads directly into the psychological prison of feeling fundamentally wrong.
It's the monumental difference between a child thinking, oops, I made a mistake, I spilled my glass of milk on the rug, versus the child thinking, I spilled the milk because something is fundamentally wrong with me. I ruin things because I am a mistake.
The text details the lifelong fallout of inheriting this specific identity, and the damage is catastrophic.
It has to be.
It cripples inherent self-worth.
Yeah.
It dampens spontaneous joy and artistic creativity because the person is always second-guessing their impulses. It erodes confidence in relationships.
And most insidiously, as the text points out, it destroys the very capacity to question the inherited assumptions we talked about earlier.
Yes, because if a person deeply believes they are fundamentally flawed, they believe their own mind is too corrupted to be trusted.
Right. They will always seek external authority to tell them what is true because they have been taught that their internal compass is broken by default.
So what does this all mean for us as adults? If we didn't choose these beliefs, if they were installed in our hardware when we were 3 years old, bypassing our consent entirely, how on earth do we escape them?
Are we just doomed to run this malware forever?
The answer the text provides is both incredibly simple in theory and incredibly difficult in practice. You escape the conditioning by recognizing the conditioning.
Recognition is the key.
The text asserts that awareness is the only solvent. Once you can truly see the conditioning, once you observe your own mind and realize that your feelings of unworthiness are just old programming running on a loop and not an innate objective truth about your soul, you are no longer completely controlled by it.
I struggle with this sometimes, but it makes sense. It's like realizing you were wearing tinted glasses. You've worn them for so long you thought the whole world was genuinely blue.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But the moment you realize you have glasses on, the world isn't blue anymore, it's just a lens.
Exactly. You step back, you create space between your awareness and your thoughts, and you are finally able to ask the transformative question the text poses.
Which is
this belief directly true in this present moment, or have I simply repeated it to myself for so long that it merely feels true?
Okay, so let's say the listener is tracking with us. They are seeing the conditioning. They are looking at their childhood. They're starting to think, wow, maybe I'm not a fundamentally broken sinner. Maybe I am just carrying a lot of heavy baggage.
They're having that light bulb moment.
Right. But I guarantee you, if they are really engaging with this, there is a giant red flag popping up in their mind right now. And it's the exact same flag that pops up for me whenever I entertain this philosophy.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If we completely drop the label of sinner, if we say nobody is fundamentally bad, doesn't society just collapse into total chaos?
It is the most common and perhaps the most logically valid immediate fear when confronting the deconstruction of moral labels. It is the fear of total moral relativism and anarchy.
Right. If I'm not a sinner, if I'm just a product of my biological drives and my childhood conditioning, what is stopping me from going over and stealing my neighbor's car?
People assume all accountability just vanishes.
Exactly. And when the cops show up, can I just say, hey, it's just my conditioning, man. My amygdala was acting up. Don't judge me. I'm not fundamentally bad.
And that brings us to the next vital phase of the text's argument, which addresses exactly this tension. Social accountability versus philosophical identity.
We have to balance the two.
The text tackles this by looking through two very distinct lenses of reality. First, it addresses the social reality.
And the text is very grounding here. It doesn't float away into abstract fairy tales. It reassures a reader immediately, emphatically stating that societies absolutely require rules.
Without laws, without boundaries, civilization does in fact collapse.
It fiercely validates the necessity of concepts like crime, justice, ethics, personal responsibility, and social accountability. It argues that every functional society must create and enforce standards for acceptable behavior in order to protect its citizens from harm.
But the text makes a crucial razor-sharp distinction here. It notes that while accountability is vital, like if you steal the car, you absolutely must face the consequences, pay restitution, or go to jail, that accountability is not the same thing as declaring the human being fundamentally spiritually broken.
Ah, I see.
The text argues that society has the right, the authority, and the absolute obligation to judge actions. If an action harms the collective, it must be addressed.
Right.
But society cannot and does not have the authority to determine the spiritual essence of a human being. And the text points out a fascinating historical reality to support this argument. Human moral standards change constantly. They are entirely fluid.
Right. This is such a good point. Practices that were considered perfectly moral, legal, and even divinely sanctioned 500 years ago are considered horrific, unspeakable crimes today.
And conversely, things that would have gotten you literally burned at the stake centuries ago, like wearing mixed fabrics or questioning the orbit of the sun or a woman showing her ankles, are completely normal, mundane aspects of life now.
So if the very definition of a sin changes depending on what century, what country, or what political regime you happen to be born into, how can it possibly be a permanent fundamental stamp on the essence of your eternal soul?
Logically, it cannot be. If the criteria for the diagnosis changes based on the era, the diagnosis is a social construct, not an absolute truth.
It's completely dependent on the context.
Which leads seamlessly into the philosophical reality the text explores next. This part of the argument asks a very uncomfortable question, one that demands intense intellectual precision.
Can a person actually be evil, or do they merely perform evil actions?
It is the classic philosophical distinction between action and being, between what you do and what you are. The text drills down into this precision.
Separating the two.
It states clearly, lying is an action, stealing is an action, hurting another person physically or emotionally is an action. And these actions have very real, sometimes devastating consequences in the physical world. But the text asserts that actions are not identity.
Action is not identity. I love this. I want to try an analogy here because I think we can make this really concrete.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you have a desktop computer. It's a great machine, top-of-the-line hardware. But one day, you accidentally download a terrible piece of malware. The computer starts acting crazy.
It's glitching out.
Yeah, it's deleting files, it's sending spam emails to your contacts, it's freezing up. The behavior of the computer is objectively harmful.
Death up.
But you don't look at the computer and say, the fundamental essence of this silicon and plastic is evil. The concept of this computer is permanently wicked, and you don't throw it in the ocean.
No, you try to fix it.
You say, the computer is running a bad program. We need to isolate the malware, uninstall it, and restore the system.
The output of the machine in that moment is compromised, and it's causing harm. But the core essence of the machine, its capacity to function properly once the corrupted code is removed, is not destroyed. The hardware remains neutral.
Exactly. If we label someone a sinner, we are confusing the temporary malware with the permanent hardware.
We are saying that because they ran a harmful program, because they committed a harmful act, their very being is corrupted forever.
And the text warns that confusing behavior with being creates an inescapable psychological prison, both for the individual and for society.
It creates endless cyclical suffering. Because if you tell someone from the time they are a child that they are a sinner, rather than telling them they committed a harmful act that they need to correct, you lock them inside an identity.
You give them a script, and human beings tend to act in accordance with their perceived identity.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
If I deeply believe I am fundamentally bad, if I think I am just a broken piece of machinery, I will eventually do bad things because that's just who I am. I will fulfill a prophecy because I have no hope of changing my essence.
Precisely. Philosophy invites the precision that breaks that cycle of inevitability. The text concludes this section by stating a profound mantra: behavior changes, being remains.
Behavior changes.
Yeah.
Being remains. Okay, so we've looked at this through biology, psychology, history, social structures, and philosophy. We've deconstructed a massive amount of inherited belief.
You covered a lot of ground.
But now, the text takes a significant turn. We are moving beyond the intellect entirely. We are moving past the rational arguments of philosophy and psychology into the direct, felt experience of what a human being actually is in this very moment.
We are entering the realm of the mystical, and specifically the concept of non-dual reality.
The text introduces the perspective of mystics throughout human history. And what's absolutely fascinating is that regardless of their specific religion, regardless of what century they lived in,
All over the globe?
right, whether they were Sufi poets in the Middle East, Christian mystics in Europe, or Zen monks in Asia, when they looked deeply into the nature of the mind, they all pointed to the exact same thing.
They pointed to a reality before labels.
Before nationality, before the concepts of success or failure. And critically for our discussion, before the concepts of saint or sinner were ever invented by human language.
They pointed to the simple, undeniable fact of pure presence. The text refers to it as the I am, pure awareness, just the silent fact of existing before you attach any story to it.
Not, I am a good person, not, I am a bad person, just the foundational reality of I am.
Now, earlier we talked about the sky and the clouds as a metaphor, but reading through Bandra's text, I actually think a better way to explain pure awareness is to think about a movie theater screen.
Oh, the cinema screen is an excellent metaphor for non-dual awareness.
Think about it. You go to a movie, and on the screen, you see a horrific war scene. There are explosions, fire, tragedy, people dying. It is incredibly dramatic, and it evokes massive emotion in you.
But the actual physical screen, the canvas itself, is not burning.
Exactly. The screen is not damaged by the fire projected onto it. And the next day, they can project a beautiful, peaceful, romantic comedy onto the exact same screen.
The screen holds all the images, all the drama, all the violence, and all the peace, but the screen itself remains entirely pristine, untouched, and neutral.
That is a perfect articulation of what the text is pointing toward. Your pure awareness, your simple presence, is the movie screen. And the dramatic movie playing out, the triumphs, the massive mistakes, the trauma, the joy, the thoughts, the emotions, that is the projection.
Sometimes the movie of your life is horrific. Sometimes you are the villain in the scene.
But the text reminds us that no matter how violent or tragic the movie gets, the screen of your awareness is never damaged. It is never stained, scratched, or permanently wounded by the experiences passing through it.
When the movie ends, the screen is exactly as vast and pristine as it was before the projector was turned on.
Your deepest nature is untouched. Mistakes occur, harmful actions happen, emotions rage, but the awareness in which they happen is never fundamentally corrupted.
You cannot be a fundamentally broken sinner at your core because your essential nature is the screen. It holds the experience, but it is not defined by it.
Which brings us to the most direct, challenging part of the text, the exploration of pure non-duality. Now, non-duality is a jargon-heavy word.
It is, yeah.
But the text explains it simply. It literally means not two. It is a realization that the observer and the observed, the individual and the universe, are not actually separate things.
And the text issues a direct warning here to the reader. It says, this is not a belief to adopt. It is an invitation to look directly at your own experience.
So let's accept the invitation. Let's look directly. Let's do an active phenomenological inquiry with you, the listener, right now, based on the steps outlined in the text.
Let's try to physically or mentally locate this permanent sinner identity we've been carrying around. Let's put out a search warrant for the sinner.
Okay, let's execute the warrant. The text runs through a checklist of where this core identity could possibly be hiding. First, let's check the physical body.
If I look at my hands, my chest, my legs, is the sinner located in the body?
We established that in the biological discussion. The body simply breathes, the heart beats, the cells divide. There is no moral identity located in the physical tissue. No sinner there.
Okay, so let's check the brain. If we cut open the skull, is the sinner hiding in the brain?
The brain is a complex organ of neurons firing across synapses, driven by biology and shaped by environmental conditioning. It is organic, reactive hardware.
It stores memories and patterns, sure.
But there's no centralized, permanent sinner entity pulling the levers. No sinner there.
Well, what about our thoughts? The voice in my head that constantly judges me, is the sinner hiding in my thoughts?
Observe a thought for a moment. Thoughts just appear out of nowhere, linger for a second, and disappear back into nothingness. You don't even know what your next thought will be until it arrives.
If thoughts are transient, fleeting events, how can a passing thought be the foundation of a permanent, eternal identity? It can't.
And what about emotions? The deep guilt I feel, the shame.
Emotions rise and fall like waves in the ocean. Anger swells up, crashes and recedes. Sadness comes, stays for a while, and eventually goes. They are energetic responses, not permanent states.
So the text brings us to a radical, inescapable conclusion.
If you rigorously investigate your own existence and you cannot find the core center in the body, you can't find it in the brain, you can't find it in your passing thoughts, and you can't find it in your fluctuating emotions.
Where is it?
The conclusion is staggering. Without relying on your memory of the past, without the labels you've been taught by society, and without the narrative story you constantly tell yourself in your head, you cannot find a permanent center anywhere in your present experience.
It is a ghost. It is a phantom constructed entirely of memory and language.
You only find temporary experiences, temporary sensations rising and falling on the movie screen of your awareness, being frantically labeled by the mind.
And there is a key conceptual quote in this section of the text that perfectly encapsulates the non-dual perspective. It states, "The wave never became separate from the ocean."
The wave never became separate from the ocean. Let's unpack that, because that is the antidote to the entire problem.
It is the core of non-dual understanding. The individual human being, the wave, never actually became separate from the totality of reality, the whole universe, the ocean.
The text argues that the deeply agonizing emotion of fundamental guilt, the feeling of being uniquely broken, is created entirely by the illusion of separation.
Right. If I believe I am a completely separate, isolated ego, a tiny, fragile wave disconnected from the ocean, fighting for survival against all the other waves, I feel incredibly vulnerable.
Because I feel vulnerable, I defend myself. Because I defend myself, I often lash out and hurt others.
And because I hurt others, I feel immense, crushing guilt. It is a vicious cycle born of the belief that I am separate.
But the recognition of unity, realizing I am simply the ocean temporarily expressing itself as a wave, dissolves the foundational premise of that guilt entirely.
It is a staggering philosophical and experiential shift. It completely rewires how you perceive your place in the universe.
But as we move into the final phase of Bandra's text, we have to bring these lofty, mystical concepts back down to the pavement.
We have to integrate them into everyday, practical human behavior.
Because it is wonderful to talk about being the movie screen and the ocean. It sounds very peaceful. But tomorrow morning, I still have to wake up, go to work, interact with my family, pay taxes, and navigate a complex, messy world where people do genuinely bad things to each other.
The real world doesn't go away.
So I have to ask the ultimate pragmatic question again, just to be absolutely clear. If I am pure awareness, if I'm not a sinner, if the violence on the screen doesn't burn the canvas, does that excuse my harmful actions in the real world? Does anything go?
And the text is resolute, almost aggressive in its answer. It says, absolutely not. Understanding that you are not fundamentally a sinner does not give you a free pass to cause suffering in the world.
In fact, it does the exact opposite.
It seems to demand far more of you, not less. Because you can no longer blame your actions on a corrupted soul. You have to take responsibility for the mechanism.
Exactly. The text lays out the practical reality of living with this realization. If you injure someone, you repair the damage. If you deceive someone, you tell the truth.
If your unexamined conditioning causes suffering to your family, you do the hard psychological work to make amends and change the behavioral pattern.
But the profound, life-altering shift here is the motivation behind those actions. In the old paradigm, the sinner paradigm, I make amends because I am terrified of hell.
I apologize because I feel a crushing weight of shame and I want the authority figure to forgive me.
I am acting ethically out of fear of eternal condemnation. My goodness is just coerced compliance.
But in the integrated reality the text describes, your responsibility and your kindness arise from a completely different, infinitely more stable source. They arise from understanding. They arise from recognizing your shared humanity.
When you realize that the other person is also the ocean, when you realize they are the exact same pure awareness, just currently experiencing a different set of psychological conditioning and a different historical background test, kindness becomes the most natural, logical response.
Not because an ancient rulebook threatened you with fire if you weren't kind, but because you deeply understand that hurting them is literally, fundamentally, hurting yourself.
It is the left hand cutting the right hand.
The text suggests that it is only when you finally drop the heavy, fearful, artificial label of sinner that true, uncoerced compassion can actually flourish in a human being.
So synthesizing this massive journey we have been on today, we started with the random accident of our birth and the geography of our beliefs.
We looked at the sheer neutrality of our biology.
We unpacked the devastating neuroplastic programming of our childhoods. We examined the heavy controlling machinery of historical institutions.
We debated the philosophy of action versus being, and finally arrived at the mystical realization of our pure presence as the movie screen of reality.
The realization that Bandra is pointing us toward is this. You are not your mistakes.
You are not your conditioning.
You are not the tragic story you keep telling yourself in your head. You are not your history.
You are the pure, untouched awareness in which every single one of those experiences temporarily appears.
Habits can absolutely be corrected. Behavior can be rigorously improved. Deep psychological healing can happen.
But your fundamental essence, that movie screen behind the dramatic projection, never needed forgiveness because it was never separate from reality to begin with.
And that profound realization brings us to the final reframing question that the text leaves us with. It suggests that the internal, agonizing dialogue you have been having with yourself your entire life needs to fundamentally change.
The question you should be asking in the dark of the night is no longer, am I a sinner?
That is the wrong question entirely. It's a question based on a false premise.
The deeper, much more profound question is, who is the one I have believed myself to be?
And the text promises that when that question is explored completely, honestly, and without fear, the heavy burden of being someone who is fundamentally wrong quietly disappears. The phantom vanishes.
And what is left in its place is simply the breathtaking miracle of being alive.
The simple miracle of being alive. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bandra's work, I want to connect directly with you, the listener, one last time. I want to leave you with a thought to chew on.
Something that isn't explicitly written in the text, but it is where all of this naturally, inevitably leads.
A final provocation for the laboratory. Think about everything we have unpacked today, all the layers of identity.
If every single label you have ever worn, good person, bad person, success, failure, saint, sinner, worthy, unworthy.
If all of those concepts were suddenly, violently stripped away from your mind in this exact second, what is the nature of the silence that is left behind to witness your life?
It is a beautiful, almost terrifying question to sit with.
And what would happen to your relationships, to your anxiety, to your joy, if you lived just one single day from that place? From that quiet, unburdened awareness, instead of operating from the heavy, inherited history you were handed.
We started this conversation talking about X-ray machines and medical diagnoses.
The world handed you a spiritual diagnosis before you could even speak, pointing at a screen and telling you that your very bones were broken.
But maybe, just maybe, it is time to realize the machine was unplugged the whole time. There is no fracture.
There is only the screen. Thanks for taking the plunge with us. Keep questioning the answers you were given. Keep looking for yourself. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Jo Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Jo bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Jo's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Jo Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by Finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org. or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.